Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Tesla has been in a tailspin. Its sales have been dropping in all markets so far this year. The company's stock price has been cut in half since hitting a record last December. And its CEO, Elon Musk, is being criticized by backers of Tesla for being absent as a leader, accusing Musk of being too focused on his DOGE adventures within the Trump administration, and raising hackles and, in some cases, a violent response from previous supporters of the EV brand. The automaker is also facing new ramped-up competition coming from China with automaker BYD. Tesla is the worst-performing stock in the S&P 500 this year. It's down more than 40%, wiping out not just wealth from pension funds and individual investors around the world, but also Elon Musk's net worth, which is down about $150 billion so far this year. I'm Mike Eppel, and on today's big story, we're looking at the intersection of politics and business, and what it will take for Tesla to turn the corner and regain its forward momentum. Joining me is Seth Goldstein, an equity strategist at Morningstar Research Services, who covers Tesla and many other brands in the auto sector. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Glad to be here.
When we look at what has transpired for Tesla, not just from an equity valuation, because obviously the stock has gone from a record in mid-December to being down over 50% from that time frame in just over 3 months, but from a brand standpoint and potentially a brand destruction standpoint. Have we ever in the past seen an integration and intersection between a company that was so tied to its leader who got this far involved in politics? I don't remember anything of this nature in the past.
Nothing comes to my mind, and this is certainly one of the many ways that Tesla stands out as a unique company that tends to be in unique situations like this one.
And the fact that Elon Musk, up until maybe 6 to 8 months ago, was potentially seen as a champion of the Democrats, maybe even before that, and then switching teams, so to speak, over to the Republican side. This was a company that was ostensibly built on the idea of environmental protection, new technology, and it still is, but from a political standpoint, I don't think the those in the left-leaning side of the political spectrum see it that way under the current circumstance.
That's right. If you look at much of the last decade, Tesla was seen as a brand for someone who was environmentally aware and wanted to show that they wanted to be environmentally conscious and wanted to help solve the climate change issue going on around the world. And that was some of the initial audience for Tesla, because when Tesla first came out with the Model S and then the Model X, it was a very high-priced luxury vehicle. So, even the Models 3 and Y are still in the luxury vehicle market. So you're looking at a buyer who can afford to pay up more. And so that gives them more options of the vehicle they want to buy. And they oftentimes view the car as signaling, brand consistent with their lifestyle choices. But now I think we've seen Tesla evolve to the point where the way Elon Musk views it is, if Tesla makes the best product for the price category, then people will still buy that product. I tend to agree for the most part. I think a car tends to be such a big ticket item for the majority of consumers that if a Tesla has the best technology for them, and many people like Tesla for something like the full self-driving technology and that it is still one of the best quality EVs on the market today for the price point. And I think that is still the appeal for the majority of consumers. Yet when you start to get politicized, whether that's, Elon Musk wading into politics, or we see some of the backlash that we've seen, in recent weeks against Tesla, then you risk turning off some consumers, and you may turn away the people who initially were attracted to the brand.
But is that how Elon Musk squares the circle in his own rationale for backing the Republicans who just in the early days of the Trump administration have reversed many of the environmental measures that were put in place by the Biden administration. That, Tesla, look, let's face it, this is a company that needs superchargers, that needs the growth of the EV sector. Buyer incentives have certainly been a catalyst for people buying EVs, but does he see it as you say, more of a mainstream vehicle purchase and not necessarily, just because it is a good vehicle and not because it does these other things from an environmental standpoint?
I think so. I think that's what Elon's view of Tesla is if Tesla makes the best products, whether that's an automotive or a home battery, solar panel system, what have you, then consumers will buy that because it's the best product, regardless of what the CEO says or regardless of the CEO's political affiliations. I think when you're looking at Elon Musk's view on what Donald Trump offers from a government standpoint, I think he might be attracted to the deregulation initiatives that the Trump administration may be undertaking. Now, some of them is to undo environmental regulations, which ostensibly goes against Tesla's master plan of wanting to accelerate the fight against climate change, accelerate renewable energy. But I think something when you're looking like setting autonomous driving regulations at the federal standard, and perhaps even something like undoing or taking away the charging infrastructure incentives where you have to have a plug for the charging infrastructure incentives that's not a Tesla plug. And I think Tesla felt that that was an unfair regulation against them at a time when many automakers are signing up to join Tesla's charging network and fitting their EVs to be a part of Tesla's charging network. So I think Elon Musk squares it by looking at the possible benefits to a company like Tesla, and certainly potentially many more benefits to a company like SpaceX that he also owns when you're looking at the Trump administration.
I think it's been kind of interesting that Musk, because he's been so forward-facing, literally next to Trump in the Oval Office on numerous occasions, doing the stump speeches. I mean, there has been a wide swath of top echelon tech CEOs, at Meta, at Amazon. You run down the list. They were all there on Inauguration Day, and yet and all, the backlash to them has not been as severe, I would say, as it has been against Musk and the Tesla brand specifically, likely because he's been so forward-facing and in the news almost every day and affecting people's lives with the DOGE cuts within government.
I think that's very true. I think the more Elon Musk is in the public spotlight, leading government initiatives, or at the very least, what he views as just recommendations that government officials can then implement themselves, to the extent that it involves, say, laying off federal government workers, to the extent that it involves cutting funding that, perhaps some groups or people depended on, that could create a lot of negative backlash. And so the longer that he is in the public-facing setting, the more potential there is that more people are turned away from Elon Musk, and then that could spread to one of his companies like Tesla.
And from a brand standpoint, the Tesla vehicles, they do stand out. The Cybertruck is not subtle. So when we see people, vandalizing vehicles on dealership lots, I mean, it's almost like they have a target because of the fact that when you see a Cybertruck going down the road, you see it very much wide open, and whereas a lot of other technologies are they're not quite as forward-facing, perhaps, or tangible, I suppose, for lack of a better description. But when we're at this level where people are so angry, and we're talking about, it being described as domestic terrorism or what have you, I mean, this is again next level, and something prior to this not before seen.
It is a very unique situation, definitely. I think part of what made Tesla stand out initially was different vehicles. Even starting with the Model S, it was an EV that didn't look clunky. It looked cool. It was new and modern. The Model Y certainly stands out even among comparable CUVs in its category. And Then you look at the Cybertruck, and it's a very unique truck. And no one would mistake another vehicle for a Cybertruck. I think that's part of Tesla's brand, is to make differentiated looking vehicles, but that also does make them potentially more of a target for people who feel that Elon Musk's politics are wronging them, or they don't like any of the policies being made, or anything they think Elon Musk may be behind. So I think it is somewhat limited. I think there's likely, for the majority or vast majority of people who own a Tesla, you're not going to get much backlash. You're not going to face anything personally. But certainly, we have seen that growing number of incidents, either at Tesla dealerships, or I've seen many videos of the Tesla cameras showing people keying Teslas, ostensibly in message to their feelings about Elon Musk.
Well, there are the bumper stickers that have been talked about going on Tesla vehicles. I bought this Tesla before Elon went crazy, is the is the slogan. But more though, not just current owners, but look, let's face it, the sales numbers, sales tell the tale, and those have not been good to start 2025 for Tesla, down more than 50% in Germany, 30% plus in California. China, which is, we'll talk about the Chinese market for Tesla in a moment, but all of these indicate that people who may have thought about buying a Tesla are maybe backing away from the brand. They might still want to buy an EV, but they're going to a different supplier. Having said that, okay, so the flip side is we've seen the president, selling Teslas on the White House lawn, which that in and of itself was somewhat surreal. Literally had in his notes how much you can lease a Tesla for. And prior to that, other Republicans, Ted Cruz comes to mind. 2 years ago, they just had wanted nothing to do with EVs. It was all gas, all power, all the time. And now all of a sudden, shockingly, they think Tesla's the way to go and everybody should buy an EV. I mean, will Republicans who previously shunned EVs, will they maybe pick up some of the slack?
It's possible. I tend to think that the majority of consumers will buy a Tesla if they feel it's the right vehicle for them. And, we're maybe looking at a very smaller set of consumers who would be either turned away from Tesla because of Elon Musk's political affiliation, or want to buy a Tesla because they want to help offset potentially people who were turned away. I just still view that as a smaller population. When you look at the first quarter deliveries, though, I do expect deliveries will likely be down year over year. But I think there's multiple reasons, even if Elon Musk was the typical CEO who didn't say very much in public, because you have, for most of the quarter, the new Model Y was not out in the three key markets of the US, Europe, and China. And with the new Model Y set to be released, many buyers who wanted one could have held out until they could get a new one. Second, you have the affordable SUV coming out later this year at a lower price point. So perhaps buyers who were on the fence of if they wanted a Model Y or not are waiting for a more affordable vehicle. And so I think with those two issues, it could make the first quarter numbers down, even if Elon Musk, never made any statements or said anything political. That being said, I think the telling impact, or any potential impact, of this political risk facing Tesla will start to reveal itself in the second half of the year. So if we still see sales decline, double-digit percentage in the third or fourth quarter, then I think we could attribute that more to the political risk and potentially Elon Musk's statements or actions turning away consumers. But if we see the new Model Y is out, the more affordable SUV is out, and deliveries start to grow again, then I think we can say, okay, the first quarter, there were a lot of moving pieces. It was very noisy. Maybe the political risk was not as big as it could potentially be.
Now, you talk about, the next generation Teslas, for lack of a better description. They have come out with the Cybertruck. That's their newest vehicle on the road. But some think that the Model Y and S, they need updates. And then this past week out of China, BYD, which is the leader in EVs in China, you can't get them in North America, but that's another issue. But they came out with this announcement that their vehicle can be charged to a 400-kilometer range in 5 minutes. And I think that raised a lot of eyebrows that if they can do that, then all of the competitors are going to have to seriously look at upgrades, and all of these EVs that are currently on the road are obsolete. So how much of an issue is that? And does Tesla look at that and go, we got a lot of work to do?
Well, when you look at Tesla's charging time, it has been falling over the past several years, and it continues to fall as they put battery management systems in that allow for faster charging. Now, BYD, it seemed, made a breakthrough. We'll have to see how that translates in the real world, if it can deliver those specs. But if it can with a higher charge time, then essentially you have solved part of what I call road trip anxiety, where many people don't buy EVs today because they can't drive far enough. The recharging takes too long and there's not enough places to charge. I collectively call that road trip anxiety. But if you can offer a 5-minute charge and then you build fast chargers at general travel plazas along highways, and the range right now is pretty much solved because most new EVs can go at least 400 or 500 kilometers, or the equivalent of 250 to 300 miles. I think that's generally been solved. But with the 5-minute charge time, then you have to build far less chargers to get people to overcome the road trip anxiety and be willing to buy an EV. So that could spur rapid EV adoption. But I guess the question I have is, can Tesla develop something similar? I know they've been working on faster charging for their larger battery vehicles like the Cybertruck, like the semi-truck. Can they apply that faster charging technology to something like the Model 3 and Model Y, which would greatly reduce the charge time? And then second, if they can't develop it internally, can they lease the technology from BYD so that they could sell it in North America vehicles where they still have the dominant market position?
Well, Tesla does have a large operation, obviously, in China, so that's certainly a possibility. Although with now trade issues, they might be running headlong into a dispute between the White House and the Chinese government. So that's another facet of this. Do we actually know much about that? Just to talk a little bit more about the BYD charging. Do we know exactly much about it? Like, is it some sort of new charging system in its entirety, or have they just figured out how to stick more electrons faster into one of these batteries?
I believe they figured out how to put more electrons quicker so you can have a higher voltage charge. And, you know, not to get too deep into the science, but the higher the voltage, that means the faster you can charge a battery because more electricity is flowing into the battery. And so I think what BYD is aiming to do is likely the battery has likely been able to flow the electrons in a much quicker way, because if you look at how a battery charges, and this is the same for our smartphones too, if you go from 0 to 80%, that takes the same amount of time as going from 80% to 100%. And the reason is once you start to fill those electrons, it takes longer for them to find the open places in the battery where they can be held once they start to get full. But if BYD has solved this and been able to have a quicker lasting high flow of electrons into the battery, then you could charge the battery in a much faster time period. BYD also was the first company to really reinvent the lithium iron phosphate battery, which is used in their vehicles, which historically lithium iron phosphate batteries were very short range. Think of the Nissan Leafs that could only go 100 miles or so, use those batteries. But BYD was able to reorganize this type of battery and able to sell longer range EVs that consumers want to buy. And so they've done a lot of work. They've been a leader in the battery space along with the other Chinese players, CATL. And so it's not surprising that a charging breakthrough would come from them as well.
Now, this raises the other question that, and some analysts have pointed this out or raised this as an issue for Tesla right now, because they have to do all of these upgrades. Is Elon Musk distracted by everything he's doing in the White House and in the political realm, as opposed to paying attention to what needs to be paid attention to at Tesla.
I think Elon Musk throughout the years has always had a full plate. Even before his political involvement, he was running Tesla, and then on his side projects was an executive and involved in a leadership position, not as CEO, but in a leadership position in X after he bought it and took it private, in SpaceX, in Neuralink, in the Boring Company. So it seems to me that Elon Musk in his free time likes to spend it doing something else outside of Tesla. But from what I hear, when I talk to management, they still see him on a regular basis. He is still making the key decisions, but Tesla also likes to run still like it's a startup where it empowers a lot of division managers to make a lot of key decisions. So I think Elon Musk tends to be spending a lot of his time at Tesla overseeing the full self-driving software development, wanting to make sure that they can get closer, get ready for the first robotaxi testing in the Austin, Texas market later this year, and switch full self-driving from what is a level 2 product where the driver still has to be in control and ready to take over to a level 3 product where the car is the main driver of the car. And, ostensibly a human can sit in the driver's seat, read a book, check their email until the car requests they take over control. So I think that's where Elon Musk is focusing the company. Elon knows that if you're trying to compete with the Chinese on the best battery or the cheapest vehicle, it's likely not going to be a winning game, because right now what we're seeing in the Chinese EV market is many new long-range, lower-priced vehicles, better batteries, quicker charge times. I think Tesla wants to compete from an autonomous driving technology standpoint and make that their differentiating factor. So my guess is that's where Elon's spending the most of his time.
Well, I mean, you could certainly argue that SpaceX has been doing pretty well. They rescued those astronauts off the space station, and he certainly is finding enough time to be on Twitter, or X, excuse me, on an hour by hour, moment by moment basis. Look, if memory serves, you've got from an analyst standpoint, you've got a hold recommendation on Tesla shares. Why? Obviously, there are various grades of what analysts think about of the stock going forward. Why do you think it is a hold right now? Is it just because there's too much uncertainty? Because, like I say, December 17th, I believe it was $479, and now it's down to the low 200s. I mean, talk about a valuation evaporation, disintegration over that time frame.
Yes. So we have a fair value estimate, which is what we think Tesla will be worth if it was taken private, at $250 a share. In Morningstar, we use a star rating system. So quickly, 5 stars is our most undervalued stocks, the equivalent of a buy. 1 star is our most overvalued, equivalent of a sell. And 3 stars is, we think it's fairly valued, equivalent of a hold. And so with Tesla's in 3 stars right now, which basically means if you are looking at Tesla, despite the fact that it's sold off nearly 50% or more than 50% now from the all-time high in mid-December, we still don't think that there's enough margin of safety that it's an attractive stock at this point. For context, when it ran up into the 480s, we had in 1-star territory. We thought it was very overvalued. We were telling everyone, it's priced for perfection. There's a lot of downside risk. We don't see as much upside in the stock at the current levels. We think it's priced as if Tesla is going to disrupt the robotaxi or the ride-hailing industry landscape. We think it's priced as if the robotaxis are going to roll out without any issues. And if deliveries were going to grow 20 to 30%, which is what Elon Musk guided to for 2025 on Tesla's third quarter earnings call. We thought that was optimistic. We didn't think they would do that. And we thought that a lot of growth was priced into the stock that was going to be very difficult for Tesla to achieve unless you were looking at a bull case scenario. So we did not like the stock by any means when it was near the all-time high. Still at current prices, despite the fall, I think it's fairly valued. I don't think there's a ton of upside. And given a high volatility stock like Tesla, I'd want to see a little more margin of safety relative to my $250 fair value estimate. So for us, we wouldn't see Tesla as that attractive until it would fall below $200, which is when it would move to our 4-star or buy equivalent.
From one of the magnificent 7 in 2024 to a mediocre, one of the mediocre 7 so far for 2025. Seth Goldstein, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
And that was Seth Goldstein, equity strategist at Morningstar Research Services. I'm Mike Eppel. You can send us your feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can also find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.